going to be doing a discussion video. I'm going to be discussing A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. Okay, so I finished this book last night at 11 p.m. and I had to take the evening to process. I was gonna film this video, this discussion video, directly after I finished it, but I was a sobbing mess. This morning I went through and I didn't take notes while reading this book. If you can see, I annotated like maybe 3 pages, but then after about like 50 pages, I just gave up and I was like, I can't take notes. This book is just, I'm too deep into this. So I took notes this morning. I went through oh my god, it felt like reliving the book this morning. I went through my brain and wrote down every key thing that I wanted to talk about, every scene I wanted to talk about, every character. I literally have like 6 pages of notes, so it's gonna be a long video. If you haven't read the first 2 books, like, you don't want to spoil yourself for this, trust. Oh, maybe you do, actually. Oh my god. Okay, we're not gonna cry. I told myself I wouldn't cry until I got to the scenes. Okay, I'm just thinking about so much right now and I feel like I'm going nuts. Okay, so if you haven't read the book, please leave. Come back when you're done. So for all of you who have just finished the books, I'm sending out love and support to you because this was the most heart-wrenching. Like, I cried more during this book than I did in the second book, and the second book was hard for me. Like, I reread the book and I cried so much during A Court of Mist and Fury, and I finished this book and it was just like, I was crying during the book, after the book, like, it was just tears everywhere. At the end of the last book, Feyre pretended to break the bond between her and Rhys. She you know, did her little magic thing and went back with Tamlin to the Spring Court. I just realized this, you guys, but every single one of these books starts off with Feyre in the Spring Court. Okay, I guess maybe the first book, it's like a few pages before she gets to the Spring Court, but every single one of the books in this series starts off at the Spring Court, and every one of those books, Feyre is a different person when she goes to the Spring Court. She's there as a spy. We find out she's High Lady of the Night Court now in the last book, which I did not expect that. I did not see that coming. Okay, pretends to be like released from the spell that she was under, and she pretends that she witnessed all these horrors and was forced to do all this stuff when she was at the Night Court, when in truth that is totally a lie and she's totally playing all of them. Lucien! Oh, poor little Lucien. I love Lucien. Lucien is the only one out of both of them who's like, doesn't believe Feyre. He has this eye thing, right? One of my predictions that I felt like Lucien was gonna know she was a spy, right? Because Lucien's eye, we discover, can see through spells and glamours and things like that. Feyre has this huge, like, High Lady of the Night Court tattoo, so I felt like from page 1, as soon as she was wearing a dress that didn't have sleeves, like, Lucien would know she was a spy. But I guess she never wore a dress without sleeves because, you know, she convinced Lucien for quite a long time. Or maybe he knew, but just like didn't say anything. Like, I don't know. Feyre goes to the Spring Court and pretty much F's everything up. Her goal there is not, 1, to spy, and 2, to slowly undermine his court. Tamlin is such a tool that it's just like, it's like easy for Feyre. Jurian and the Hybern twins. Shortly after Feyre arrives, Jurian and the 2 evil Hybern twins, who I'm so happy are dead, you have no idea, arrive, right? So when Jurian arrives, like, okay, I am so happy he is not evil. My prediction for ACOWAR was that Jurian wasn't gonna be evil. I never believed for a second that Jurian would come back and be evil because nothing ever added up for me with him, okay? So with Jurian, he fought against Hybern. He was fighting for the humans before he was killed and then like put in that ring or whatever for Amarantha, and I felt like, yes, everybody thought, you know, like he would go crazy after being under the mountain with Amarantha for like centuries and having to witness like all of her horror. For me, I was like, okay, Jurian has to, like, for all these years, has to witness Amarantha torturing humans and fairies. If anything, Jurian would come out and be like more passionate about fighting for like the humans, right? So I was right. That is exactly what Jurian said. Why? Like, ugh. Okay, focus. That is exactly what ended up happening. My prediction was on point, you guys. Jurian, like, it broke my heart when Jurian was there. There's that scene where they were in Grayson's house and Rhys and all of them discovered that Jurian's good, which I knew was coming. I knew was coming at some point. And Jurian was just like, it just broke my heart because Jurian's like, you never looked into my head. Like, you know, he expected Rhys to look into his head as soon as he was out and see that, you know, he was not this evil guy that he had, you know, put a mask on to get Hybern Hybern's trust. Just like, Jurian, I'm so happy. I mean, yes, he did terrible things and he shot Azriel, which I haven't forgiven that, but I understand why he did. Anyways, okay, so back to what we were going to talk about. So the Hybern twins. Oh my god, what is their names? Dagden and like Branna or something? In my head, I was just calling them like Thing 1 and Thing 2, because literally, like, that's just like, I couldn't pronounce their names, so I was just like, Thing 1 and Thing 2, hate you both. That scene at the wall, 3 humans came through, the children of the blessed. This is also what I knew Jurian for sure had to be good, because those children of the blessed came to do anything for you, like, oh, we love you, we worship you guys, and Jurian's over here just looking at Feyre like, are you serious? Like 500 years ago, this would not be a thing. Feyre, luckily, ends up getting into their heads, and the humans end up going back through the wall. Then Jurian goes up to Feyre and is like, oh, thank you. And I'm like, a crazy madman who doesn't care about people and who's with Hybern would not say thank you for saving those humans. And that's what I knew for sure. I'm like, Jurian. Thing 1 and Thing 2 the next morning then go and do terrible things and kill them. Look on Jurian's face, the way Sarah described it, with it just like absolute, just like, God, like he loathed what Thing 1 and Thing 2 did to those humans, and that's when I was 100% like, yeah, Jurian's, he's a spy. Thing 1 and Thing 2 end up revealing Hybern's whole plan to Feyre while she's just like sitting there eating an apple, right? Hybern plans to destroy the wall. Feyre's, you know, packing. She's about to leave and go back to the night court. She's about to leave, and she hears Lucien and Ianthe. Oh my god, Ianthe. She hears them, and if you guys don't know, remember in the last book, Ianthe, you know, forced herself onto Lucien, and it was just like, I want to kill Ianthe at this point. Feyre hears Ianthe and Lucien, and she's torn between, you know, this is her only opportunity to get away, to get back to the night court, or she can go and help Lucien, and I am literally screaming at the book, go to Lucien, do not leave him, he made a lot of mistakes, but I feel like he is also a victim of both Tamlin and Ianthe, and I'm like, if you leave Lucien, he will not make it out of here. Like, you have to go in. Until she goes to Lucien, and Ianthe has him pinned on the tree, and my heart, like, I love Lucien. I don't know if you guys know how much I love Lucien. Like, molesting him, and I'm just, Feyre does the hand smashing thing. Feyre ends up brainwashing Ianthe when I'm just like, no, you need to kill her. She will find a way to come back. Ianthe is a crazy bitch and you need to get rid of her now. But anyways, so she didn't get rid of her, and later we find out the repercussions of her not killing her, like I was screaming for Feyre to do. Thing 1 and Thing 2 show up, and I'm like, no, no. And in Feyre's head, she's like, I still have a chance, I can just winnow out of here, but I end up leaving Lucien, and I'm like, you better not leave Lucien, you better. Totally, like, when she beheads Bragna, Thing 2, like livid, okay? Lucien and Feyre just go on this journey, and they go through the autumn court, and when Lucien was like catching the fish, and it was like he was home again, so they escape, but then Lucien's brothers came, I was like, no. I thought they were gonna kidnap Lucien, but they end up escaping and getting into the winter court, that lake, when they were on that lake and the ice was cracking. I was dying. I'm like, someone needs to come and help them. I thought maybe someone from the winter court would come. Then out of the sky, Cassian comes and Azriel, and they save Feyre and Lucien. And literally that scene when it was just like, I could picture Cassie just like swooping in with the wings and just like, ah. I was so worried about Cassian because, you know, this entire time when Feyre and Bruce were communicating, you know, he was always like, they're okay, but he never like gave details. Literally in my notes I wrote, hell to the yes. We're back at the night court, we're back in Velaris, we're back with the family. Nesta, we'll get to it in a second. Wait, real quick though, my favorite characters in this order, just so you guys know: Azriel, Nesta, Lucien, Elaine, Amren, my top favorite characters. Like, I love all of them. Elaine is like this hollowed out, she is just hollow, and part of me predicted that hollowed out thing. And we also found out that Lucien is Elaine's mate, which I do not ship them by any means. I ship Elaine and Azriel, which we will get to in a second. Lucien is introduced to the court. Lucien realizes it's not like this court of nightmares like he thought it was. It's a court of dreams, and Velaris is beautiful. Next, Nesta. Throughout this entire book, Nesta was my absolute favorite character. I hated her in the first book, and I hated her in the second book, and it took me a little bit to like earn her trust back and be like, okay, maybe Nesta isn't this cold-hearted person, but actually is more than her. From literally as soon as she came out of the cauldron, everyone, Amren, everyone was like, she is something different. She took something from the cauldron, which ended up playing a huge part in the book. Took a piece of the cauldron's power, and now she's like bonded with the cauldron, and it's kind of like can sense when it's being used and where it's at. Her and Amren, which are like I pictured her being best friends with Amren, but Nesta and Amren starts training Nesta on how to patch up the holes in the wall. I knew Nesta was going to be a powerful character, and I felt like she kind of like fell a little flat in the end with her power, but like during the whole entirety of the book when she was just like training with Amren, and Amren just was like, you know, she had such a belief in Nesta. And that conversation they had when they first met, when like, you know, Nesta was just like staring Amren down. What are you? Elaine, on the other hand, is like crazy. Everyone thinks she's crazy. Everyone's like, she's speaking in riddles, and I'm like, if she's speaking in riddles, you know, she has to be like, be able to see the future. We find out that she's a seer, and Azrael literally, there's that scene where finally they're like, we don't know what to do, so they brought Lucian in and was hoping like Lucian could sense something through like their mating bond and figure out what's wrong with Elaine. And then Lucian's like, maybe she needs a doctor, and then Azrael comes in and is like, she doesn't need anything. It's us who need her because she is a seer. I was literally like, Azrael and Elaine, I ship you guys so hard. Going on, Feyre and Rhys are trying to find allies, trying to organize a meeting with the High Lords, and they end up going back to the Hone City in the Court of Nightmares to have a meeting with Kier. Is his name Kier? Mor's terrible father. They end up going down there because he has a legion of Darkbringers that they're, you know, they need. That scene when they were under there, Rhys and Azrael didn't tell Mor that they invited Eris and were trying to work with Eris, and you know, that whole scene. And then when they came back and Mor's like, how could you do that? You know, like if Amarantha walked through that door and I said I was gonna work with her, how would you feel? And Rhys was like, I would gladly work with her. And like Mor, I could just picture the tears down her face, and like that was the only time I think in the book where I just absolutely was so angry at Azrael and Rhys for not telling her. And I was just, oh god, I was just the emotion and the tension in that scene. And then when Amren stepped in and was like, you guys, I have kept this group together for centuries, you guys both need to take a step back. Feyre ends up going to the Bone Carver because I knew that she was going to go back to the Bone Carver. I was like, that guy is powerful, really creepy but powerful, and could definitely like help. In order to get their help, he wants this mirror thing that's like a mirror that makes you go crazy, and we later find out that you see yourself in the mirror, and that's why like some people can't handle the truth. You can't handle the truth. And they don't tell Amren that, which was like the stupidest thing. They don't tell Amren they went to go see the Bone Carver. Amren finds out, everyone's like takes a step back when she finds out because they're like, oh, she's angry. Find out what Amren is. We find out like that she, you know, came from this other world, and that she was an assassin soldier to a god of a young world. I believe that's like what it said. She had to bind herself to like a high fae human form in order to walk out, so that, you know, the prison didn't recognize that it was her walking out. The scene in the library, which, oh my god, I was dying during that whole story about like when Cassian flew down into that pit in the library and then like flew out and was like, oh my god, shocked at what he saw. I was like, there is something down there. At first I thought it was like the third sibling. The Bone Carver said that he had two siblings, right? So the Weaver and that other creature, and I thought maybe it was that other creature that was down there, that other death god or whatever, but it ends up being Briaxis, I think it was, like this nightmare creature, which is so awesome. The Hybern people end up tracking them there and trying to bring Nesta back, and that's when we find out like that just how powerful Nesta is. Like if King of Hybern wants Nesta, like whatever she took from the Caldron had to be like a serious something. That moment when like Feyre was standing there and that thing was around her and she was making that deal, I was so scared because I'm like, he's gonna want like her life or like someone's life or like bones or something, but then he's like, I just want someone to come down here and tell me stories once in a while, and I'm just like, that's when I kind of like that creature. And Cassian ends up coming for Nesta. Cassian and Nesta, I ship them so hard, you guys. King of Hybern ends up attacking Adriana in the summer court, and I was like, yes, because this is like, I felt like that was a chance for the night court to like redeem themselves with like the summer court because of the blood rubies and all of that. That whole scene with like Amryn and like when she was like in the last book when she was like, you know, trying to figure out the book and she was using the blood rubies as like a paperweight. Love Amryn. They just make it out of that fight and the summer court is still okay, and they come back and moving up the meeting with all the High Lords after that, and Nesta ends up going and Tamlin ends up showing up. You guys, when Tamlin showed up to that meeting with the High Lords, I was like, oh shit, stuff is about to go down. Rhys, Tamlin, Baron, Eris, Mor, all of them, Azriel, Cassian, all of them in a circle. That's like, you're just asking for trouble. Tamlin shows up. The stuff that comes out of his mouth, I wanted to just punch his character after he blames everything on Feyre and doesn't see how corrupt he is, and just, I hated that. But anyways, Rhys ends up like muting him, and that was probably like the best moment in that. And then Hellion starts laughing. Oh, by the way, Hellion, we find out Hellion might be Lucian's father? What? You guys know what that also means, right? Mor slept with Hellion, so Mor slept with Lucian's dad. Oh my god. Anyways, that was great news, and I feel like that's gonna be a huge part in the next book because someone said that, you know, if it's true that Hellion is Lucian's father, that means that Lucian is the only heir to the Day Court, which is insane. But it also means that poor Lucian, like, Lucian's carrying this weight of his family, right? They better tell Lucian this because, you know, Lucian his whole life thought Baron was his father, and, you know, to find out like that Hellion, this awesome, funny, you know, High Lord is actually his father, like, I feel like Lucian would admit that'll just, you know, change his life. Tamlin, sorry, back to Tamlin. So Tamlin claims he's good, which right off the bat I was like, no, he is not good. Like, you do not trust, after everything that Tamlin did, I would not trust him, but he ends up not redeeming himself, but ends up being better than we thought he was. Still, I hate him, like, he can just go. So that evening, they end up staying the night, and that scene where Nesta comes out and is like, Feyre, I need to talk to you, and she tells Feyre, like, we need to go, because, like, she can feel something wrong with the Caldron. She's like, we need to go, something doesn't feel right, and Feyre is just like, oh, maybe it's just da-da-da-da, maybe it's da-da-da-da, and then Cassian comes in, and Cassian's like, what's wrong? And then Nesta's like, we need to go, something's wrong, and then Cassian, like, doesn't even think, he's just like, I'll tell Rhys, and he goes and tells Rhys. He said that, I just love all of that. So they end up staying, like, at this point, I feel like they should be listening to Nesta. Next morning, right before everyone leaves, Nesta falls to the floor, vomiting, and everyone's like, she was poisoned, and I'm like, no. Maybe Hybern would be casting a spell, but then Rhys, like, looks to the side and, like, shoots out his power, and he's like, Hybern just destroyed the wall. He destroyed the wall! He destroyed, like, literally, like, I was, what? Basically, everything Nesta was doing these past few days with Amryn means nothing because they were all too late and the wall is destroyed now. Immediately, you know, all the High Lords are like, you know what, we're sending our armies, you know, it's done. Like, no more debating about this. The wall has already fallen. The only thing we can do now is just prepare everything. Humans are left defenseless now, so they come up with a plan to glamour Elaine, and oh my god, that scene. They go to Grayson's house, she was supposed to be married to, all the humans, and oh my god, that scene where Grayson literally just dumps her. Like, I can't think of any better word. He's just like, I will never love you, all this stuff, and I just can picture Elaine's face breaking, and I can just picture Nesta, like, wanting to burn him to ashes when everyone finds out that Jurian's actually good. After that, they all go to the Illyrian war camp. Now they're just preparing to fight, and they get to the war camp, and there's a scene, you guys. I have to get the book for this one. We get to the war camp, right? And so, you know, there's that, what is his name? Devon, something, like the commander of the Illyrian Legion. So he's kind of like looking at all of them, and then he's like, what is that? And Nesta's just like staring at him, like, just, you know, like her Nesta's like look. That Cassian's like, that is none of your concern. Devlon's like, is she a witch? There's witches in this world? I opened my mouth, but Nesta said flatly, yes. find out what witches are, which I feel like is gonna play a huge role in the second book, okay? Like witches, because later on Nesta asked like, what's the difference between a high fae and a witch? And I think it was Cassian who said like, oh, you know, a witch is someone who tries to use spells and things like that to get more power than they were granted by the Caldron. And I was like, as soon as he said that, I'm like, there's gonna be witches in the next book, there's gonna be witches, I know it, and Nesta's gonna be a witch, like I know it. Cassian was like, she may act like one sometimes, but no, she is high fae. Love Nesta so much, you guys, so much. After that, they have their first battle, and then Nesta could sense that Cassian was injured and like wrapped his hand, and that whole scene, I was just melting. I was just a puddle on the ground. Feyre does something that's both brilliant and stupid. She leaves during the second battle, you know, after she told Mor like, oh, I'll be right here, and then she goes to the middle ground, I think that's what it's called, to hunt the cereal. She needs to figure out where Hybern's forces are, and the only way to do that is to find the cereal, and she ends up finding the cereal, and she also ends up finding Iantha. Iantha ran right into the Weaver's cottage, and I was just like, yes! And then the cereal, she goes back, and the cereal is dying. No matter how scary the cereal looks, like, you know, the cereal helped her. Since book 1, the cereal has been helping her, and the cereal is lying on the ground and dying, and he's like, you listened, you stayed with the High Lord, and Feyre realized it, and I was just... After she meets the cereal, Feyre learns that Nesta has to scry, which again, that sounds like a very witch thing to do. Nesta's really scared, and so Cassian comes and just like puts his hand on her back, and he's like, you could do this, like, you know, he's there. And so Nesta, she goes in to, you know, and is holding the bones over the map to try and find the Caldron, but she ends up getting sucked in too deep, and Feyre has to go into her head, and in that scene, like yelling at Nesta, like, let go, open your hands or it'll find us. And I just picture like Nesta there just shaking in that whole scene. Oh my god, I was so scared for Nesta. Caldron knew she was watching, and that just, the Caldron was like alive, and that whole aspect of the book just really scared me. That evening, the Caldron decides to get back at them. Amren, Nesta, and Feyre had heard this like song, like this haunting song, and they knew it was like the Caldron, and they all came out and they're like, what's going on? And then it isn't until Azriel comes out, and Azriel's like, where's Elaine? Nesta just stares at him for a second and then runs into Elaine's tent and is just screaming Elaine's name, and she's not there, and I'm just like, no. Picture, like, I felt like Nesta and Feyre must have been devastated because they had just come from seeing Hybern's whole army through that scrying thing. Like, they knew if Hybern had gotten Elaine, like, she doesn't have much time. They're like, there's no way to get her back, and Azriel's like, I will get her back. I will get her back. And that's when I'm just like, Azriel and Elaine, yes. Feyre and Azriel, they go straight into the camp. Disguises herself as Ianthe, and I'm just like, yes! Just barely make it off that cliff, you guys. That scene, Azriel is like, he has Elaine, and they weren't able to get the chains off her, so they're running. Feyre's like running, and they're trying to run to the edge of the cliff, and that girl's there, and they end up saving that girl. Feyre's running, trying to figure out how to use her wings, and those I call them hellhounds, like in Percy Jackson, but those hellhound things are after her, and I'm just, that scene was so like suspenseful. And this Tamlin comes, and like I said, I hate him, but he went and he came to save her, and she runs and she makes it off the cliff, and they're flying. And there was a line in the book that Feyre said, and I don't think I'll ever forget this, but she had looked at Azriel, and Azriel was holding Elaine, holding this other girl. His wings were just shredded, and there's blood running down his back, but he's still like flying, and he's getting them out of there. Looking at Azriel, and she's like, I don't know, I don't want to know when, where, why, or how Azriel learned to manage pain like that. And it was just, that broke my heart, because like I was wondering the same thing too, and just that whole scene. Get back to camp, and you know, they patch up Azriel, and everyone makes it, and Elaine's okay, and she kisses Azriel on the cheek, and we find out that Mor is bi, okay? And I am so happy when we find that out, because the entire time, like, I loved Mor ever since she had gone into the Spring Court and, you know, saved Feyre and got her out of there, but I was always kind of iffy about Mor because, like, you know, she was, it always felt like she was, like, you know, leading both Cassian and Azriel on, and just like their whole trio relationship thing just never sat right with me. And so we finally have an answer though now. Like, when Mor said that, it just made so much sense, and I was so mad at myself because I'm like, how did I not realize this sooner? But it just, that talk between her and Azriel and Cassian. Like, I can just, like, that's gonna happen in the next book. I already know. They better happen in the next book, because that's gonna be a really emotional scene. I already know. Before the final battle happens, Feyre goes and decides to face Arobus, that mirror thing, and brings it to the bone carver, and then we find out that the bone carver didn't even want the mirror. He just wanted to see if Feyre was worthy enough, which I could just imagine Feyre fuming and being like, really, you guys, like really. The last 80 pages of that book, all standing there. The plan is that Feyre, Amren, Nesta, and Elaine are all gonna try and make their way to the Caldrone in the midst of the battle, hoping that the divided power can, like, they're able to cast this spell and, you know, nullify the Caldrone. Everyone else is just gonna go into battle, except for Azriel, who has injuries but is still gonna, you know, do as much as he can. And that scene when Rhys is just looking at all of them, and they're all there this last time that they're all probably gonna be there. And he looks to each one of them, and he looks at Cassian first, and he says, you know, if I hadn't met you, you know, I would have never known strength. He looks to Azriel, and he's like, if I hadn't met you, Azriel, then I would have never understood that, you know, light and hope can be found even in the darkest of places and time. Look to Amren, and he was like, if I hadn't met you, my powers would have destroyed me a long time ago. And then he looks to Feyre. Like, that scene just had me in pieces, you guys. Battle starts, and that's when we find out that Rhys had made a deal with the Weaver, so now we have the Weaver, Bryaxis, and the Bone Carver all there in the front line, and I'm just like, yes! They're fighting, and they're losing. And then, right when they think they're gonna lose, Drakon and Mirian and, oh my god, Feyre's father come with a whole ship of armies and an aerial unit, and I was just screaming. I was screaming, okay? Like, okay, Feyre's father, like, the entire time we were just been told that, you know, he's trading off the continent just to kind of, like, keep him out of what's going on. Her father found out, you know, that they had all been turned to Fae. He knew everything, and he was trying to redeem himself, and so he went and he got a whole bunch of ships and was gonna fight for them, and he ended up dying in the end. Drakon and Miriam, they all end up showing up in the nick of time, and now the battle is just like at its peak. Amren and Nesta and Elaine and Feyre, they all start running towards the Caldrone, but Nesta falls over and starts throwing up, and I'm just like, oh my god. Then Nesta just looks up and starts screaming Cassian's name, and my heart fell into my stomach, you guys. Like I thought at first when she was screaming Cassian's name that Cassian had, like, been shot or something, and she had felt it, like, through their bond, which I know is there. Cassian came flying, and I'm like, oh my god, thank the Lord he's not dead. Seconds. Nesta warned Cassian seconds before the Caldrone, like, just obliterated his entire legion up in the sky, and I was just like, Nesta can't even walk, and so they're all looking at each other, and they end up coming up with a different plan. King of Hybern is at the Caldrone, and they know even if they get to the Caldrone that, you know, they don't stand a chance against him. So Nesta ends up saying, Amren and Feyre, you guys go to the Caldrone. Me and Cassian will distract him. Feyre and Amren get to the Caldrone. Feyre grabs onto the Caldrone and looks to Amren, and Amren doesn't grab the Caldrone. She throws the book aside, and I just, oh my god, I was like, no, 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 Amren is not a traitor. Feyre ends up being sucked in by the Caldrone, taken to that little area where Nesta and Cassian are facing the King of Hybern. King of Hybern has their father, kills him. And then he goes after Cassian, and Nesta just, like, gathers her power, and I'm like, yes, this is it, she's gonna kill him. She ends up using all of her power in one blow, which I didn't even think was possible, because the whole book they talked about how powerful Nesta was, and, like, it just doesn't make sense that she could use all her power at once. Nesta's on the ground, and she faked him out, and so she blasts him back, but that's just, like, the absolute end. Like, she has no more power left. The King of Hybern is slowly walking towards them, and Cassian is just, like, broken and injured on the ground. Nesta goes to him, and Cassian just looks at her and is like, go, just run. Nesta's like, I can't. Cassian kisses her and says, the only thing I regret is not having more time with you. So they're just looking at each other, and the King of Hybern is coming, and so Nesta just hugs him, and they're just hugging each other, waiting for the end. And then out of the blue, Elaine comes with Truth Teller and she stabs the King of Hybern, and oh my god, I forgot about Elaine. And just that whole fact that Azriel, like, I totally skipped over the fact that, like, Azriel gave Elaine a Truth Teller. He has said he had never ever done before, and so she stabs him, and then Nesta goes up and just finishes him off and cuts off his head. There was a scene where Nesta was holding up his head, and I think there was a line that said, like, oh, you know, Elaine and Cassian and Nesta realized whose head they were holding, and at first I thought what that meant was, like, the King of Hybern had, like, glamoured someone like Azriel or something, and they had actually killed someone else, not the King of Hybern. But anyway, so I was for a second there, had a heart attack, but we later find out, like, okay, it was the King of Hybern. So after that scene, we go back to the Caldrone and the top of the mountain, and Amren's there. Feyre looks to Amren, and that's when Amren tells her that the only way to win this battle is for Feyre to release Amren. Feyre looks at Amren and says, but if I release you, you won't remember who you are anymore. Looks to her and she tells her, you know, when my father sent me to this world, at first I thought it was a punishment, and then I realized maybe it was a gift. Time here with all of you, it's been a gift. And Varian's there. Varian's like, don't do it. Amren looks to Feyre and is like, tell Rhys, leave a cup out for me. The inner circle cannot be the inner circle without Amren. Like, Amren is just that, she is such a core part of this whole book. She is that one, she's that person of wisdom in the whole book. Amren gets into the Caldrone and Feyre says the spell and releases Amren, and Amren turns into, like, this winged, what was it, like assassin, like something, and she goes and obliterates all of Hybern's army. I didn't let myself get excited because I'm like, knowing Sarah J. Maas, she's not done yet. Feyre thinks it's over. She thinks, you know, this battle is over, they won. Rhys winnows to her. Caldrone split into 3 pieces when Amren came out, and now there's like this black hole in the ground and it's sucking in the whole world basically, which is terrifying. Rhys has absolutely no power left, but Feyre's like, we need to put this Caldrone back together. The whole time Rhys is oddly, like, not worried and is like, we got this, and starts giving her his power. I knew the moment that Feyre said that she had tried to get into Rhys's head, but that wall was up, and I knew. The entire time that Feyre is putting this Caldrone back together, Rhys is just saying, I love you. And the entire time, like, I was just screaming at Feyre. I'm like, Feyre, stop it. Like, do you know what's happening right now? And, like, when the Caldrone is fully formed again, she turns around where she's like, I didn't feel it anymore. That thing that was there whenever I took a breath, that bond, it was gone. So anyways, and she's just, that scene was so vivid in my head, you guys. She's just laying over him and just screaming, and all the High Lords are there and they're just watching her silent, like unable to do anything, and she's just screaming like, help him. Finally, all the High Lords, they give a little piece of themselves, their little energy to Rhys. Even Feyre, you know, figures out how to do it, and the only person left, Tamlin, and I was so sure Tamlin was gonna walk away. But when he came up and gave that light to Rhys and said, be happy, Feyre, too much. And I still hate Tamlin, but in that moment, like, everything came back, like the nostalgia of it, of like, you know, in book 1, at the end of book 1, it was like Rhys and Feyre were in like the opposite position. Feyre's neck had snapped and all the High Lords were around them, and Tamlin was just like, you know, help her, and they all gave their light, and now it's like the situation's completely flipped. And despite everything that happened in the whole 3 books, Tamlin still gave that little bit of light. Rhys ended up coming back to life, and I was just so happy when he woke up and the first thing he said was a joke. Tears were just coming down, and then he's like, oh, I have one more surprise. Will someone please pull Amren out of the Caldrone before she catches a cold? Amren Amren was not gone. Basically, Rhys said that when he was, you know, in that in-between, you know, that space in between this world and wherever he was going next, he had felt her there and had reached out a hand to see if she would want to come back. And she did. Best conclusion ever. That, like, everyone ended up surviving in the end. Cassian and Nesta and Azriel and Amren and Rhys. The very last two sentences of this book, you guys. When he pressed his wings against mine just because he could, because he wanted to, and we'd have an eternity of nights to do this, to see everything together. Feyre's last two lines, a gift. All of it. No, there's gonna be 3 more books in this series, but you know, it wasn't until the very end of this book that I realized, you know, this book is a conclusion. It's a conclusion to this part of Feyre's life. It's a conclusion to this part of, you know, their story of, you know, Rhys and Amren and Cassian. You know, this is the end of this part. Last 2 lines just like, it's the same thing that Amren had said before she went into the Caldron. Okay, so that book was amazing. My theories for the next book. Okay, so first off, Lucien came back. I didn't really address him that much, even though I love him. Lucien came back. Feyre's father had found Vasa, who was the 6th queen, who's like this firebird, which is so awesome. But my theory is that, okay, Lucien is Helian's son, which I feel like is going to play a big part in the next book, okay? At the end of this book, everyone was celebrating, you know, everyone, you know, went back to the house, went back to Valeris, you know, they were all drinking and celebrating. Even Elaine was okay, but the only person who wasn't was Nesta. That really concerned me because, like I said, she was very bonded to the Caldron, and when the Caldron broke, you know, something broke in her too. Something is missing, you know, in her now. Like there's something not there. And this is where my theory about Nesta becoming a witch comes in. Like, the difference between a witch and a high fae is a witch, you know, tries to find, you know, more magic for themselves, you know, using spells and things like that. And so I feel like Nesta, because of what she lost, is gonna now try and collect more magic to fill that void in her. And so Nesta's gonna be a witch. I'm pretty sure she's gonna be a good witch. I don't think Sarah J. Maas would make Nesta a bad character. Like, I pray they would not make Nesta a bad character, especially with everything Nesta went through. Like, she's gonna be a good witch, like I already know. The queens, those terrible mortal queens, you know, they still have an army. They were not involved in this whole, you know, fight thing, this war, so they're still a huge threat, you know, especially with Printhia being like, you know, trying to come back together. Honestly, I hope Vasa just like goes and kills all the other queens, because Vasa is just like, she's awesome. I feel like she's gonna play an awesome role. Like, Vasa and Lucien are gonna end up getting together, and Azriel and Elaine, you guys already know I ship them. What I do want more of though, the only thing I wish we had more of was more Azriel in this book. And Azriel's like such a complex character, and I feel like, you know, whenever Feyre sees him, she doesn't describe things that he says, but rather like how he looks and, like, you know, the shadows. Biggest prediction for the next book, which no one has addressed yet, which I feel like is so important. I don't know how so many people are overlooking this, but in A Court of Mist and Fury, okay, when they first found both halves of the book, right, Amren specifically said, she's like, you cannot join both halves of the book because it will send out this signal that'll awaken things that have been asleep for a very long time, okay? And I never forgot when Amren said that, okay? Later they end up joining the books, which I feel like ends up not being a huge deal for them, and even in this book, like, we didn't really see the repercussions of that book joining, but I feel like in the next book we're gonna find out just what kind of creatures and or gods were awakened when the book was joined. Also find out that, you know, more about this place that Amren came from, you know, this rip in the sky that she came through, and that this other world that she came from also had humans. So I feel like Sarah J. Maas might even bring us into, like, different worlds in the next book, which would be awesome. The book was insane, and I'm gonna still be thinking about it for a long time, and I cannot wait for the next book to come out next year. I plan on doing discussions for the rest of this series, and I hope we get like all of my ships in the next book. Until next time, keep reading. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!